And we're on the air. Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi today, and I appreciate everybody's patience and kind words. Thank you. I'm getting there. It's kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back with all of this, and it's all up here. Otherwise, I'm not suffering like a lot of people are with flu and flu symptoms. I just kind of have it up in here, and that's about it. So hopefully another day or so, and plenty of hot green tea with blueberries in it and, and all the rest of it, we'll have it taken care of. Okay, we've got a lot going on tonight, so I think we're going to get right to it, and we're going to punch up the surface conditions here because it is really amazing what's happened. You know, we had a foot to a foot and a half of snow cover in my area, and that, of course, has all been taken away. You can see some of these temperatures right now in the upper 50s and low 60s. Funny thing is, you know, I have friends that live along the shores of coastal New Jersey, and the wind has been coming in off the bay. Well, the bay is frozen, and that's left temperatures right along the immediate New Jersey shore about 15 degrees cooler in the mid-40s as opposed to what the temperatures are inland, which are in the low 60s. And on Long Island, the opposite. What's happening here is the south wind off the ocean is coming in off over the frozen bays, and that is actually creating and feeding into some very dense fog that occurred today and through this evening. And the visibility is in a lot of areas down to near zero, and in some places you can actually kind of see that the fog is only at the very bottom of the atmosphere, maybe the bottom 50 to 100 feet. You can watch it roll in and out. It's really pretty cool. We're going to take a look at a few other places here with all this. As let me get this to where I can move it around. Look how warm the temperatures have gotten, even up into northern New England. I mean, we've got 50s all the way up to near Caribou, Maine, which up until very recently has been pretty much below freezing nonstop since mid-December. And across upstate New York, we've got temperatures up in the upper 50s to around 60. But we do have that weather front moving right along. And if you look at the wind barbs here, where the winds go from south and then over to north, and that is now moving across northern Pennsylvania, moving the colder air is now beginning to arrive in Bradford County. Very soon it'll be arriving in Susquehanna County and on up through upstate New York, in and around Binghamton, soon to see the colder air arrive. Look at the 60s, mid 60s down, even some upper 60s in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, but then jump over into the other side of Pennsylvania. Now this front is much further along than is being drawn on the map. It's actually right where you see where it's got the 58, 55 in the middle of the state. So the front is actually right in there. And you can see the temperatures and the winds behind it, winds gusting to 30 miles an hour or more. We've got temperatures down below freezing now in Pittsburgh, on up through northwestern PA. Precipitation has changed over to freezing rain and sleet, and then you go back a little bit further, and we're looking at snow, looking at temperatures down in the 20s, very gusty winds going on here. In fact, let me just see if I can take the winds. See if I can take the winds off so the map's a little clearer. We can just look at the temperatures now. Just give me 1 second, and we'll take the wind barbs off and the wind gusts, and that should just leave us with the numbers. Good. So we got that done, and we'll move that out of here. So there you have it, and you can see the colder air here, 20s. You start to get into the teens as you move up into Michigan and on up through Wisconsin. We will pull up even colder air, single digits, and then we start to get into the below zero readings across northwestern Wisconsin and on up through Minnesota and the Dakotas. A couple of minus 11s showing up here during, remember, it's only 5 o'clock. It's just going into sundown now, so these temperatures are going to drop off even further. This is a very cold shot of air. This air mass is coming down. It may not quite be to the extreme of what we saw with those air masses a week or so ago, but it's certainly cold enough, and it's going to do its job as it drops eastward and southward over the next 24 hours or so, and we have all kinds of watches and warnings up. If I can find the map, I hope I didn't lose it. I got so much stuff hidden back here. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of things. All right, I see somebody just hit the super chat button. Let me see who that is, and that is Chrisetti. Thank you very much, and thanks for checking on me yesterday. By the way, I really appreciate that. Thank you. You know, when you start not feeling well, plus I had a few things going on work-wise that was making some issues, and Reaver 501, depending on where you are, the fog lifts when that cold front moves through later on tonight. So here we have the watches and warnings that are up this evening. We have an extensive area of winter storm warnings that are up through much of western Tennessee. They're now over with, though, in westernmost Tennessee, so Nashville probably still in it or borderline with that winter weather advisory that goes to the east. Winter storm warnings throughout much of Kentucky, southern Indiana, southeast and northeast Ohio, advisories to the west and north of there for the rest of the state, southeastern Michigan, central Indiana. And then we have winter weather advisories up for all of Pennsylvania except the southeast, and on up through all of New York State except the extreme southeast. And for Long Island, no winter weather advisories there. Still dealing with flood watches, though, for the Hudson Valley and for New England. We have winter weather advisories for northwest New Jersey. They added a small portion of western portion of Passaic County to Sussex and Warren, and then that extends up the Hudson Valley now to include Orange, Putnam counties northward. So basically, along and north and west of Route 84 covers it, and also all of Connecticut except for the extreme south. And those winter weather advisories and various winter storm warnings up also for upstate New York, because when the rain goes over to sleet and then to snow, there are going to be some issues. And you know, for some areas, as that cold air comes in a rush, your temperatures drop from 60 to 32 pretty quickly. So any standing moisture that's around is going to freeze up, and then it goes beyond 32. It drops down into the 20s. Why don't we take a look at the radar as of 6:10? And you can see how busy it is. There was heavy rains across much of New Jersey earlier. That band has now moved up into New England and also shifted to Long Island, especially central and eastern Long Island. We've got heavy rains back down through Delaware and Virginia. Those are moving northeastward, so that'll fill in New Jersey in short order. And then you go back to the west, back through Pennsylvania, on up into Ohio, eastern Ohio. You know, you start to get into that colder air, so you're talking snow, and then a little bit further east, closer to that frontal boundary, there's that band of sleet and freezing rain. The big question for those of you who are watching for my neck of the woods, which is the areas from eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, southern New England, Long Island, New York City, the Hudson Valley, we are going to be in a race. And that race involves the cold air coming in from the west, and at the same time, you've got this wave of low pressure that is going to be moving eastward and passing very, very close to coastal New Jersey and Long Island. And it's going to be a question of, does the cold air get in here before the precipitation ends or afterward? And a lot of times what happens is, at least here, most, but not all times, most times we wind up with the precipitation just basically shutting off just as the cold air arrives with little consequence. It's going to be a bit of a close call this time around, and we'll take a look. I'm going to use a model that I haven't really used very much of, and these WRF models, by the way, if you watch from your local television stations, they use the what's called the RPM model, and it's basically this model. So it mimics it very, very closely. So one of the things that this model did today was that it was pretty aggressive in bringing that cold air in a bit faster, and you can see it here as the low is on the south shore of Long Island. There is a change over to sleet and freezing rain. You can see where the snow is, by the way, through upstate New York and back through central Pennsylvania. So it never really gets to a cold enough aloft for snow, but there could be a couple of hours where it changes over to some sleet and freezing rain where the temperatures drop. This model is more aggressive in bringing the colder air down than some of the others. It gets it in faster and a little deeper. And then, of course, it pulls away to the northeast. And I'll show you the temperature profile here on this model, which is exceptionally cold. I mean, I was really shocked at how cold this is. But when we'll bring it to 7 a.m., and this is at 7 a.m. on Saturday. Here's the freezing line is where the blue starts, so it picks out pretty well. It's actually down right almost on the coast here with 20s in many areas as you go north and west. So if this model's right, you get about 3 hours worth, 2 or 3 hours worth of freezing rain and some sleet. You could have some really slick conditions, and they may wind up being a little bit further east and south than what some of the other models are showing. This particular model kind of has a hit and miss reputation. When it's good, it's very, very good and spot on, and when it's bad, it's kind of way off. So I'm just kind of putting this out there. This would be the colder and more extreme solution. The forecast would reflect some of the other models, which would keep the changeover confined to where the advisories are up, and then you would just turn sharply colder. And by the way, when I talk about cold on this model, I want to bring you down to Sunday morning. 8, 9, 10, 11. So 7 a.m. Sunday morning. Look at how far south the single digits and below zero get. And I have to tell you, even the GFS, some of the numerical GFS temperature guidance, which I use on a regular basis and is usually pretty good, brings down some inland spots in northwest New Jersey and the Hudson Valley close to or just below zero. So it is certainly reflecting this very cold air mass, and the cold air is actually going to be feeding down from the north, and the temperatures that are being indicated through upstate New York are pretty extreme. I'll bring the GFS up just to have a comparison here, so you can take a look here. The GFS is not quite as extreme or as cold. It's mostly teens and single digits as you go south, and then you got to go up further upstate New York to get into the below zero readings. But again, the numerical guidance, which is a little different from what the map guidance is colder than what the actual model, the numbers that are being printed out here on the map. So we are going to continue to deal with precipitation tonight. So why don't we pull up the rainfall, because of the flooding issues that are occurring in some places. And there's already been the rain that has been around. So this is as of anything, this model is reflecting anything that's since 1 o'clock this afternoon. And you can see that, a lot of areas pick up an additional half an inch to 2 inches of rain. In some places even in Maine a little bit more. And with respect, now we got to be careful here with the snowfall, because of the fact that we're dealing with sleet and freezing rain, and I'm still not quite sure how these positive change snow maps reflect that. I would think the numbers that I'm seeing back through Ohio and Kentucky and into Tennessee, on the 1 to 3, maybe a few 4 or 5 inch amounts, probably makes sense. So maybe that gives me a little bit more confidence in what is being generated here. I'm not 100% certain about these amounts that are up a foot plus in western New York and on up into north central New York State. But, some of that could be lake enhanced too, with the winds coming in from the north. So take it for what it's worth. There will be certainly sizable enough snowfalls. I know the offices up here are all forecasting anywhere between 6 and 12, and maybe some spots forecasting a bit more. So I think that, I guess the positive change map looks okay to me, and at least it gives you an idea. And for those of you, I know this is a big ski weekend with the holiday weekend. You certainly had incredible ski conditions for the last month plus. Even though the warm weather today and some of the icing that's coming down is going to cause a bit of a problem, you are going to get snow right on top of that, and then it's just going to stay cold all next week anyway. So I think overall you'll be maybe not in perfect shape, but you should certainly be in very good shape for skiing going forward. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about with respect to the long range. Okay, and we are going to have, I believe, a couple of weather threats next week to take a look at. So why don't we jump over to what the models did today, and I'm going to pull up. I think the big question is there's going to be two weather systems in play here. The first one will be probably on Tuesday. There's a weak system that's going to be swinging out, some energy that's going to be swinging out from the Great Lakes. And this is going to set up a potential issue with a second, stronger system that's going to develop off the North Carolina coast Wednesday night into Thursday. I just pulled up the European there. I want to get the GFS up first because I want to show you what the differences are in the two models. All models have some reflection of this. The GFS, now here's the setup on the GFS, and I want you to look at, I have everything outlined, and if you go to my website, you can read the whole article that I wrote about this, and this is where, you know, model differences here show up really, really well, and they're pretty obvious. And this is a good example of a real forecast challenge because of the differences that exist. Even though when you give a first look, they may look the same, they really aren't. The GFS has a weather system that it develops off North Carolina, but it's going to wind up taking it pretty much straight to the east or east-northeast, and the impacts will be to the mid-Atlantic coast and then out to the east from there. Now, it's doing that because there's a bit of energy in the northern stream. And you can see it. I have the red line from under the letter R and ridge that goes southward into New England. So there is flow coming out of Canada into New England, and that acts as a way of suppressing this weather system. Anthony Orr just pointing out severe thunderstorm warnings are out in central Pennsylvania and in one county in Maryland. That's incredible for this time of year. Although I wonder sometimes if the threshold has been taken down a bit. But we'll pull it up on the radar in a second. We're going to go back to this here. You got this flow into Canada from this northern stream energy, so it kind of acts as a way of suppressing things to the south. Also out in the west, you've got a system crashing into the Pacific Northwest, which basically flattens this ridge that's out in the west. And whenever you get a big ridge in the west, that's always important to, you know, storm development and track in the eastern part of the United States. So this look on the GFS contrasts strongly to the look on the European, which is, it kind of at first glance, if you looked at it, it would say, oh, it doesn't look that different, but it really is. And what you have on the European that's different is that the number of changes. First off, there's this ridge in the Atlantic where the GFS had that kind of flat. The European has a much stronger ridge, and to me also looks like it has a much stronger blocking signature across Greenland than the GFS does. It also has a bit of a weaker system in the flow in Labrador, and as a result, this system has more room to lift up to the northeast, and more importantly, out in the west. The system that is crashing into the northwest on the GFS is still really pinned back near in the Gulf of Alaska. It's much further west, and that allows for not a perfect ridge in the west, but a stronger one. And the European winds up lifting a developing storm from off the North Carolina coast to southeast of Cape Cod by Thursday. So I think what will happen is we may get some snow here later Tuesday into Tuesday night as the northern stream system kind of comes eastward and gets into position. And then we have the actual energy dropping southward and around that's going to create this weather system for later Wednesday night into Thursday. And that'll be the more important one. Now, which model has the better handle on this? Well, I'll be honest. I think the European has had a really terrible time this winter on a lot of these systems, and I would be, I'm kind of cautious about about putting a whole lot of confidence in it. All right, I just wanted to punch that radar up. One of the radars. This is a view up from western New York into northern Pennsylvania, and you can see the echoes showing up in the yellows. I'm going to get the other radar shot. We'll be able to see this better with respect to severe weather. And then if you guys give me a minute, I could probably pull up the radar in question. But I'm thinking, right in, you can see there's it looks like almost a little bit of a line there in down in southwest. Is that the one, or is it this line here that's blossoming up from northern Virginia into that narrow Maryland panhandle on up toward the Pennsylvania border? So you know what? Why don't we? I'll solve this problem pretty easily. I'll just punch up the Weather Service's site and see what we got. And it's near Altoona. Okay, so it's that band that's in western Maryland. I'll bring up their local radar because that'll show you the watch box better. So hang on one second. We'll do some nowcasting here really fast. I'm going to watch the clock. So here we go. So here's that radar view, and where there was a yellow triangle. Tell me it disappeared in the time. Okay, you can kind of see that sort of yellowish polygon that's on the western part of this. I'm having a tough time with my eyes here, so but it is there. Okay, that's the area in question with regards to the severe weather. So it's in and around the Altoona area, and that is where the front is, getting ready to move through Altoona. So it's moving right along here. It's almost, as we go into the 7 o'clock hour Eastern time, that front is making some quick progress across Pennsylvania. I'm going to watch it closely because that's going to really be important in terms of whether the cold air gets in faster or not into the east. Okay, you know what? Let's go back. I want to put up the European model. And then I'm going to go over to Europe in a little bit because you guys got some winter weather going to be going on there too next week. Seems like both the eastern part of the United States and Western Europe will have some winter weather going on at the same time. So we'll punch up the European, and this is their version of the surface map. So we're into Sunday, Monday, now Tuesday. If there's a low in the eastern Great Lakes, you've got a high that's kind of built down from that comes in over the weekend, winds up going out northeast of Maine, so it's sort of ridged down the coast. There's a bit of an inverted trough, maybe a weak low here that you could probably put east of North Carolina. This is Tuesday, and the frontal boundary continues to extend southward. Now, as we go to Wednesday, the frontal boundary becomes a little more pronounced, and you got lower pressures off the southeast coast of the U.S. You see where the blue is back through Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky, Tennessee, and northern Alabama, Mississippi. These colors represent the jet stream overlaid on the surface map, and there's your upper low in that shaded blue area in southern Indiana. So your flow along the east coast is south-southwest. So by the time you jump into Thursday morning, you have a fairly impressive surface low southeast of Cape Cod at 987 low, and this would suggest certainly that you could probably wind up with snows, perhaps just inland of the coast of North Carolina and southeastern Virginia, on up northeast from there through Maryland, Delaware, eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and eventually up into New England. So that is the Europeans' picture of this. The GFS, on the other hand, because it can't lift, and that's a real issue. Look, this is the difference, by the way, the same time frame. The GFS has the upper low flat off the North Carolina coast with the surface low way out to the east. And in fact, I'll back it up, and you can watch the progress here with the snow on the map. There's your snow for Tuesday that moves on through, and that goes out, and now you've got that low that develops. But again, because of the flatter nature, suppressed nature of the GFS versus the European, that gets taken out to the east. I have to tell you quite honestly, the GFS in the mid range, which is where this is, has done better than the European has. The European has not done well this year in some of its mid-range outlooks and its longer range outlooks. Seems like the GFS has had a better handle on those on that. On the other hand, the GFS has fallen down when it gets closer and inside of the shorter range. So that's our puzzle for next week. And in terms of the long range, very interesting. I've been reading and hearing all sorts of things. And again, I don't, I try to keep an open mind with this sort of stuff because, nothing's always written in stone. But certainly when you look at the GFS and the long range on this run, at least now we're at January 24th, it keeps wanting these runs keep wanting to show it getting warm late in the period, but we never seem to get there. It seems like every day it's warm, but it's a day later. But it's a day later. But it's a day later. And, this run today of the long range now kind of keeps things, rather wintry, not necessarily frigid, but certainly there is a cold air flow into the U.S. now through the weekend of the 21st and 22nd. And then maybe as we get toward the last days of January, you get a bit of a ridge that tries to pop up in the east. But I got to tell you, my confidence level on this is really low. The upper air pattern seems to want to fight very hard to keep a wintertime, some sort of wintertime pattern in the eastern United States. Even though some of the longer range tools might suggest that we should get a bit of a break. We are getting a break somewhat from the extreme nature, but when I say a break, those models are pointing to maybe some kind of a different pattern setup. And I keep going back to what I've been saying, which is I think we're going to have a pattern reload as we get into February. I'm not sure if it'll be early in the month or maybe it'll be a little bit later into the month, but I think at some point there's going to be a pattern reload. Okay, my buddies in Europe, get ready because you've got some interesting weather coming your way as well. And we'll show you the upper air for you because you've got a nice vortex. You see it moving here across Greenland and Iceland, and it drops right into Western Europe and extends south and east from there. And you've got a very cold flow coming from Greenland across England into France and Germany and the Netherlands and so on. And that actually drives cold air all the way down into Italy and Greece. I mean, this is really a very cold look for you guys that's happening. And in terms of snow, as I'll back this up. First off, I'll show you what's happening with respect to precipitation. Now, there isn't too much going on at the moment, with some showers coming in for later tomorrow into Saturday. No big deal. But then we've got this push from Greenland with a very intense low pressure. You can see it up here on the coast of Greenland, a 944 millibar low, and that swings a front through, and you got snow next week in England and Ireland, and it's fairly persistent through much of next week. And eventually, some of these snows are going to make it down pretty far south. I got to show you this because this is about as an extensive a snow coverage map that I've seen for the next 10 days. I mean, I don't know about the specific amounts clearly, but this is all the predicted snowfall in Europe for the next 10 days. And, there's some really decent, pretty solid amounts through England and parts of Ireland, particularly Northern Ireland. And also down, look at Italy. I mean, all the way down in the higher elevation, all the mountains, all the way down to the boot and into Sicily. Quite a bit of snow being indicated. Also quite a bit of snow being indicated in the northern parts. Of course, the natural areas where you would expect to see it in the mountains in the Alps and the Italian and Swiss Alps, and also throughout much of Germany and easternmost France, and even down into northern half of Spain. So this is pretty active stuff here from that standpoint. And we'll check out southeastern Canada, also showing some a fair amount of snow. Nothing crazy though. These are in centimeters, so we're talking about some places getting up to 25 centimeters over the next 10 days. So 2.5 centimeters is an inch. So if you're talking 25 centimeters, you're talking about 10 inches of snow over the 10-day period. Now, whether that comes in one storm or whether it comes in several, I've imagined that it'll come in several. Here is the snow and ice situation now for tonight and Saturday, and the cold air is also pushing eastward through New Brunswick and toward Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. And on the northern edge of that, there is some heavy overrunning snow. Never quite changes over to snow, even in Nova Scotia. That's odd, but that is the case. And even for Newfoundland, southeastern Newfoundland doesn't see a change over to snow before that ends. And then we're going to depend on what this coastal low in the east for later next week. And other than that, it looks like relatively benign systems. Here's one along about next weekend on the 20th of January that clips Newfoundland with some snow, and then more coming beyond that. So winter time here. This winter, I got to tell you, has really turned out to be quite fascinating for me. I'm really I'm enjoying it so far. I think back to a lot of folks' comments going into this winter with regards to what their feelings were as to what was going to happen. And I think this is another very good lesson in understanding the fact that meteorology ain't easy. And the atmosphere can certainly surprise you when it comes to this sort of stuff. So it's all good. So let's check out your comments. Franklin Taylor, 6 to 10, warmer for you. But again, I'd be careful because, the atmosphere, when I look at the upper air, Franklin, you're in Arkansas, when I've been looking and watching how all of these things have played out in the last couple of weeks, we've had quite a few unexpected turns with regards to the overall pattern. So I'd be careful with that. And also, by the way, when they do those 8 to 14 day outlooks, when they come out in the afternoon, they are based on weather model guidance from overnight last night. So it's kind of, I don't want to necessarily call that old data, and it's not their. It's because it's a lot of work that goes into that. They can't, with these models coming in every 6 to 12 hours, you can't just automatically jump to the next model run. You got to eventually just pick one model run and just use that. And things may have changed a bit with the midday run. So just kind of use it with a bit of a grain of salt. As to the changeover timing, because I did notice that someone mentioned that, as to the changeover timing here tomorrow morning, it's probably going to be sometime after 3 a.m. But just remember that there is a short window of opportunity for a changeover to sleet and freezing rain, and if it misses that window, it just isn't going to happen because the precip shuts off. Reaver 501, the GFS always takes these things so too far to the east. Yeah, it does, but then again, when I showed you the comparison of what's going on in the upper air, it has a legitimate reason why it's doing it, okay? And that's the question, is determining, does the GFS have a better view of the east, of what's going on in Labrador and what's going on in the west? Because those are two distinct differences that the European and the GFS have in that how they handled the west. That Pacific North America index, that PNA index, crashes to from off the wall positive to neutral and then to negative. If that ridge crashes, then then you would not have a setup that would lift the action in the east up the coast. At the same time, by the way, the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, is also crashing from positive to neutral and going negative. So that would also favor systems to track more south and east. So it's a delicate balance. If the Europeans right that that ridge in the west is going to hold, then you have a chance. If not, then the GFS may have having the more suppressed solution, may wind up being the better choice. I will say also the fact that this year suppression has not worked. That we've seen these systems be less suppressed and further north and west. So we're going to work out, that's the issue we're going to have to work out as we go through the weekend. And yeah, Cullen, the European from today's run did generate some rather, impressive snow amounts north and west of the coast. But again, I would really kind of it's a huge grain of salt this far out into the future. Tom Adams, is a blend of the two models reasonable? Well, you know what? That right now, that might not be a bad idea because of the fact that maybe, let's say, we could make I think you could make a case that the GFS is too fast in bringing that system into the west coast, and as a result, crashing the ridge in the west too quickly. On the other hand, the European has not handled systems in the upper air structure in the eastern part of the United States very well all winter long. So maybe you want to, at this point, kind of compromise between the two. I think that would at least lead you to believe that you have to, discuss the possibility of some kind of snow event, that lighter one for Tuesday and one for later Wednesday night into Thursday. I think you have to kind of include it in the forecast at this point and wait and see where this goes as we move through the next couple of days. But yeah, I think that's I think blending the two is probably a reasonable thing. And Reaver, I could cynically say or sarcastically say that if you want to know when you can pin me down on accumulations for Wednesday, how I could answer that by saying, well, how about next Thursday? But no, you know what? Why don't I usually like to I don't like to make an early call until we're, say, inside 72 hours. So maybe Sunday night, if not Sunday night, certainly Monday morning. Let's see. Mary Atkins got ice and 3 inches of snow early this morning. Got more snow Monday. They're saying 2 to 4. Mary, where are you? I'd like to know. Jason Schaefer, this is the pattern for most of the winter establishes itself at the beginning. Yes, that has been my experience with these things. With the winter, there's a primary pattern that sets up at the beginning of the winter, and usually, but not always, there's this kind of relaxation period of that pattern. Sometimes the pattern flips to be exactly the opposite of what you had for a week or two. Sometimes it just kind of relaxes, where it has the similar look, but it just doesn't have the extreme nature to it. And then it goes back for a second round. Oftentimes the second round is either not as strong as the first, or it is a little different than the first. There's a little bit of a variation in there. Maybe the trough position is slightly further west or further east. Maybe on the other hand, sometimes it does reload and it's colder. So it's even worse than the first time around. I would hate to think that we could have anything worse than what we had. I mean, that was pretty extreme as you can get, I believe. So it would be not good if that happens. Middletown, David Fuller. I gotta remind myself where Middletown, New Jersey is. Hang on a second. Town, New Jersey. Oh, you're in Monmouth County. I doubt it. I seriously doubt it that you will see. You'll see it there. Javon Johnson, snow near Columbia, South Carolina. If the GFS is right, Javon, you might have a shot to see snow out of that. But the GFS has got to be right with that suppressed look with the upper low. Then you got a chance. Okay. I think if the European is right, it'll be more for northeastern North Carolina, north and east. Tom Adams, why has the NAO been so infrequent in recent years? I started to go back and I didn't finish. But you can actually go back and look at the NAO values going back to like 1940 something. They're on the NOAA the climate, the NOAA climate site, and that does seem to happen. There are times where it just disappears for years at a time in the winter time, but it does show up at other times of the year. It just could be that it's not in sync. Got to remember too, there are other things that are going on in other, around the rest of the atmosphere and in the upper atmosphere and in the stratosphere that kind of impact all of this. So, I don't know that the fact that it's been gone for the last, that it's been not a big factor. Let's say that let's use the phrase that it's not been a huge factor over the last number of winters and infrequent. You have to really go back to, I think, 9, 10, and 10, 11, where you had the NAO working really, really off the wall and nonstop for almost a couple of months at a time. And also, by the way, the nature of the NAO is one that is very unstable. It doesn't, when it is around, most times it's not around for more than a week or two. So it's unusual for it to be around for longer periods than that. Sometimes you have long stretches where it's negative, but usually it's like a week, 2 weeks, sometimes 3, and then it changes after that. And again, with respect to our weather and our winter, and as I've pointed out, that it's vastly overstated in terms of its impact. You don't need it. You certainly have not needed it this winter. It hasn't been there. It briefly showed up with the snowstorm last week, and that's because the low got so intense that it actually brought the NAO down to negative briefly for one day. But that was all because of how intense the low got. Let's see. Just trying to get through. Joshua Pan. Do me a favor, hold your question till the next time I see you, and just give it to me again. I want to just look at a couple of things with regards to that. You said, what type of things do they do to perturb the ensembles? GFS has 2 members with a foot for DC, but all the others were under 4. I didn't get a chance to look at the ensembles today, so let's discuss that over the weekend as we get a little bit closer, and we'll see what it does, and then we can address a few other things with that. 631 for tint roll-up. The rain ends tomorrow morning, probably around 7, 8 a.m. I don't think it goes to any kind of change for Long Island, and then it turns sharply colder, probably be down in the low and mid-teens by Sunday morning. Matthew Warman, 2 to 4 inch. That looks like a light event on Monday night, for Tuesday. Maybe it could be a 1 to 3, 2 to 4 type event. I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to get 2 events back to back like this, but if the energy can hold on aloft, you might be able to at least put down a couple of inches in some places. All right, folks, I got to wrap it up because we're coming up to a quarter to the hour, and I'm going to be on. I got to do TV at the top of the hour. Thanks for everybody for being here. It was a really good chat tonight. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much again for Chris Eddy hitting Super Chat tonight. Get myself a hot chocolate or maybe just a nice big tea so it could help me with my my cold. And hopefully I'm at the end of it and I'll be better over the weekend. Okay, and speaking of the weekend, there will be live streams this weekend. I'm not sure what time. We'll do them tomorrow or on Sunday. So watch the schedule on the channel page. I will, a lot depends on what I got to do tomorrow, like everybody else. I got, an oil change to do, a car inspection to do, and a few other things. So we will get a live stream done tomorrow and again on Sunday. 9:15, roughly 9:15 tonight on my Facebook page, the Joe Cioffi show, the Joe and Joe show, and we'll go through this all over again and look at a few other things, and we'll get Joe's opinion on what he thinks could happen going forward. And check out the website post, meteorologistjoecioffi.com. Thank you for those of you new subscribers to my YouTube channel. Welcome aboard. If you are watching and you haven't hit the subscribe button, go ahead. It's free, and you get notified. You can get you can get notifications on these live streams, which I do at the very least once a day. Have a great evening, folks, and if we don't see you this weekend, have a good weekend.